Hello YouTube and welcome to my 8th edition of Thorsday. And today on the show I'm going to be taking a look at a Roman deity, but this one is unique in that he is not actually co-opted from any other mythology. So he's not Greek-based or, in the case of myth, or Persian-based. He is uniquely Roman and he goes by the name of Janus or Janus. I'm not entirely sure. I'm guessing Janus. But anyway, I do hope that you enjoy and find this fairly informative because I know I did. So please, sit back, relax, and have a good watch. Now, the name Janus literally meant archway in Latin. Now, he did go by a couple of different names or titles, one of which was Janus bifrons, which meant Janus two-face. He also went by the name, or by the title rather, he who looks both ways, and he also went back in older days, before the Greek gods came into town. He also went by Janus quadriphons, so Janus four faces. So yes, he actually went by a few different names, usually involving his face, which is fairly important, as I will discuss in the next section. As you can guess by the previous section, Janus has two faces. Now, the two faces came about in a later period, as I had mentioned. Before that, he was shown often as having four faces, thus Janus quadriphons. But we'll focus on Janus bifrons for now. Janus bifrons would often have one face on, well, it was one face on one side of the head, so like here, and then the other face on the other side of the head, so he could look sort of both ways, or one in the front, one in the back, sort of thing. Now, these two faces, in earlier times, were shown to have one more youthful face, clean-shaven often, of looking more of a younger man, and the other face as being a bearded, slightly older man, usually middle-aged to senior, more middle-aged, sort of a stronger look to him. Now, this is important in one sense, as I will discuss in his domain section, but for now, I'll also mention that later on, he was more often represented as just being a bearded, older man on both faces. Now, the significance of that, I'm not 100% certain on. I couldn't really find very much in regards to why that changed, but do know that it did change from a slightly earlier to a later period, that he went from a youthful and older to just two older faces. And as mentioned with the quadriphons, four faces. Now, I'm not certain if there was any youthful or older differences in there. I think they were all pretty much older ones. But yes, he is often depicted as such, as having the two faces. So yeah, that's pretty much how he looked in most of his depictions. So as far as where Janus comes from, or where he's tied to, in so much as locations are concerned, from one of the two main myths I was able to find on him, he's actually tied a bit to the Thessaly region of Greece. Now, in his myth, he actually comes from Thessaly and moves over to Rome, and so he is tied to sort of both of those locations, more so to Rome, obviously, where he is a Roman deity. But yes, in the mythos, he does come from Thessaly, so that is important to note at least a little bit. So yes, he's from Greece over to Rome, which is kind of interesting considering that Romans often, well, I shouldn't say often, but Romans actually took a bunch of the Greek deities and printed them upon their own, so I mean, it's kind of a neat thing that happened there. But yes, Thessaly is definitely one of the locations that Janus is tied to, as well as the city of Rome itself. So the symbols of Janus actually go together pretty much hand in hand, as one can assume from his name meaning archway. One of his symbols is archways. Another being doorways, basically any sort of entrance-exit sort of thing that you can find there, as well as keys. So oftentimes when he was depicted in full body, as opposed to just his head, he would be shown having some keys with him. Now, this is important again to his domain, which I'll discuss next, but yes, they all sort of go hand in hand as far as his whole symbolic meaning, his domain, his whole area that he rules over. So it's pretty neat, but yeah, that's pretty much all that I was able to find as far as his symbols are concerned. And like I said, in his domains it's explained a little bit more, so you'll be able to get more of the meaning behind that in the next section. So the moment you've all been waiting for, Janus's domains. So, his faces, doorways and archways, and the keys all come to new beginnings. Beginnings and ends. Past and future, those are basically his domains. New life as well. So, when you look at any sort of depiction of him, when you see the two faces, one is symbolically looking towards the past, the other symbolically looking towards the future, and that's pretty significant. I mean, when it came down to beginnings and ends, it was believed that the Romans thought that the new beginning is basically like, you know, you're going through a doorway to start something new. So that's sort of where Janus comes in, where he is basically the guardian of the gates. That's essentially what his role was to usher in new things. So he was pretty significant in that sense, which is why he was definitely not a minor god. He was pretty up there. He wasn't like top tier, but he was pretty dang close. If not, I mean, I didn't see a whole lot of evidence supporting that he was, you know, the top dog, but I also didn't see a lot of evidence supporting that he was a low guy. So yeah, he was pretty well up there anyway. As one could expect from such a lofty domain of beginnings and ends. I mean, you gotta be up there, right? So yeah, that's pretty much the main focus that I drew upon when it came down to Janus, was that he is the beginnings and ends of many a thing. And as you'll see in the worshipper section, there were many ways that he was worshipped that focused on his domains, that focused on the beginnings and ends. So yeah, that's pretty much what I was able to find on him, and I really like that. So the worship of Janus took several different forms. Most notably, if you take a look at your calendar, the very first month of the year, January. That was actually named for Janus, which makes perfect sense given his two faces, one looking towards last year and the other looking towards this year. So I mean, that was part of his whole shtick, basically. So that's one way that they honored Janus, was by naming the first month of the year after him. In addition to this, he was worshipped regularly at marriages and during harvest time, of course, for new beginnings, basically getting his blessing. The other way that he was honored and worshipped was through a ritual marching through certain archways that were double-gated called Ionis Geminis. And these Ionis Geminis were very important in a way that when they were open, they represented that Rome was at war. When they were closed, it was peacetime. Now, I read a little bit on this, and I found that the gates were actually only closed twice for any length of time during the Roman Empire. So I mean, that was pretty crazy. But yes, they marched through it in a certain pattern, essentially for good luck in battle. If they marched through it in the wrong way, it would be bad luck. So they made sure to go through the right way as much as they could. So yes, that's pretty much how Janus was honored and worshipped during the time of the Roman Empire. Quick rundown of the two main myths that I found about Janus. One, he was a mortal who had a wife named Camisi and a son Tiberinus. Now, he was in Thessaly originally, and he came over to Rome, where he was actually a bit of a ruler alongside another one after he got there, and the river Tiber was actually named after his son Tiberinus. The other myth was actually that he was around Rome during the time of Romulus, and he actually was in Rome and fought back against invaders, and he was later deified upon his death. So, a really quick rundown, I do apologize, short on time, all that good jazz. But anyway, I do hope that you enjoyed this video on Janus. I'm Drominicus, and stay tuned for my other videos.